Good evening, everyone. Here is another session, another online session being hosted by MELO, the Society for the Study of the Multi-Ethnic Literatures of the World. We have started these sessions recently, and we hope to carry on with them for a long, long time. We want to involve all of you who are keen on joining us, who are keen on listening to these sessions. And well, they are all recorded, and afterwards they will all be put online. They'll be uploaded to YouTube and then shared on social media. We have some senior people coming in, and we will soon have the next run also. We'll have mid-level scholars also. Right. So the co-hosts will please take care that all the people who are joining now will join in. And those who are a little late, please remember next time you must come on time. It's nice to begin on time and end on time too. Our speaker for the day is someone whom we know very well and someone who's closely associated with MELO. MELO, the society that I just told you about. And I'm sure you have heard a lot about it. It's one of the, well, it's one of the leading societies, academic societies of India. And we've been around for the last 27 years. Yes, 27 years. We've had international conferences every year, sometimes twice a year, and we are going to get more and more active. So join us and we'll have great times together. The speaker for the day is Professor Krishnan Unni. Hi, Unni. Welcome to this session.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So this is Dr. Krishnan Unni. He's a professor of English at Deshbandhu College, Delhi. He's a creative writer in Malayalam and in English, and he's published several books. He has edited Gabriel Garcia Marquez's Chronicle of a Death Foretold. His debut novel in Malayalam is Keralam Oru Documenta, and this book has won several awards. His latest book is on the Italian philosopher and theorist Giorgio Agamben. It was published as part of the Theory series by SPCS Kottayam, Kerala. His recent project is on contemporary art practices in India, and his articles on art have appeared in a lot of magazines such as Mar, Lalit Kala Academy Journal, Chitra Vartha, and in a number of other places. He's written for newspapers. He's taught in several universities, including Tribhuvan University. And our last conference was in Nepal, and a lot of people whom he knew when he was teaching in Nepal, they were happy to catch up with him again. So he's taught in a number of places in Nepal, in UK, Nottingham University, Manchester University. He's a member of the Cultural Studies Group in Cairo University, Egypt, and he's a representative of the Memory Studies Network at the University of Lund, Sweden. He has presented papers. He's very much in demand, you know, and he's like one of the scholar gypsies. So he has been presenting papers all over the country, abroad, and on various platforms. Unni, it's a long, long CV, but I must tell them that with MELO, he's much in demand also, and all our conferences are incomplete without him. So welcome, Unni, to this forum, and it is our privilege to have you speak to our audience. Had we been in person, you would probably get a loud applause, but I think there are some reactions out here and people can put in, well, I don't know. Anyway, welcome you, Unni. Unni will be talking about some classics from South India. And because he's more familiar with the subject than I am, then I too look forward to what he has to say. He'll be focusing on, have I got this pronunciation correct? Chilappathikaram. Chilappathikaram?
Yeah. Right.
Tamil. The enigmatic nature of the text is defined by the multi-layered ideas it presents. I won't give much away now, but Unni, I must tell you is one of the leading intellectuals of the country. I'm not being too lavish in my praise. He deserves all the praise that one can give him. And Uni, there are lots of people who have logged in here. Nivedita from the West Indies has just joined in. Gonul, as I told you, is from Turkey. And I'm sure there'll be other people also, all waiting to hear from you. So, Uni, over to you, and we look forward to what you have to say.
Thank you, Manju, for that kind of extensive, I don't know, an introduction. So I would like to begin with an anecdote. It's not a old anecdote. Something which happened very recently, yesterday only. So this is something which is slightly disturbing. Disturbing in the sense that yesterday I happened to read one of the important news that appeared in The Guardian, that very soon in the UK and also perhaps in the US, English departments will be closing down. It was a shocking news for me. Of course, this was an agenda for quite some time. And we knew that in most of the universities, they have a problem with English studies as well as with other language studies or whatever. And precisely due to the new education policy which we are having in India, we also face a lot of problems. English departments have turned a different shape. And as well as other departments also. Though NEP claims that NEP is slightly giving more importance to each and every vernacular language, this has become a grave concern to all the teachers and including all the students. Now, I was not fascinated with the news. However, early morning, I got a message from a good friend of mine telling that she told me some time back that students do not want to learn classics. They are not bothered about classics. They can read the contemporary kind of any kind of literatures or any kind of narratives. However, there is an apathy towards classics. Why is this so? This kept on lurking me for quite some time when I went to the institution today to do some work, and when I got back also. If a community arises without having a proper idea regarding what is a classic, or without having a knowledge that what the classics are all about, such a community is going to be a very, very deranging community in course of time. This is not something that is affecting India, I suppose. A peculiar kind of community is on the rise where they are not too much into reading classics and also enjoying classics. While reading, every reading is a kind of a rereading of the classics also. And we find this community rapidly disappearing. There are several reasons behind that. One reason perhaps can be everything is available in a capsule form before you. So you do not go into reading a text or to understand a text, the socio-historical factors behind a text, when these capsule formats are there. Yet another methodology is classics have been diluted in various forms. We find a lot of cultural practices in contemporary times that are associated with classics. However, this is not a reproduction of the classics when we look at these contemporary cultural practices or whatever. On the other hand, I would say these are certain snippets which are taken from the classical texts. Indian classical texts like Mahabharata, Ramayana, epics and classics fundamentally. And also Chilappathikaram, from where I would like to begin my lecture. So this is a very dangerous tendency. So I was intrigued completely by the news which I read in The Guardian, and I am sure some of you might have read the news. And also the information which I received from a very good friend of mine telling students don't want to read classics at all. So what makes the classic a classic? I would like to fundamentally ask this question. There are different reasons before us. Some group of people believe that classics are those texts that stand the test of time. Some people believe at the same time that classics go beyond the reach of geographic boundaries. So you cannot curtail the classic within the geographic boundaries of a nation, any particular nation for that matter. Greece, India, or even there are other classics which are from Azerbaijan. There are several classics from certain other regions of the world, but some classics have stood the test of time, and also they broke the narrow parameters of these boundaries. Yet another reason can be classics encompass the passion, the angst, the suffering, love. And yet another reason can be this is a torchlight. Classics are always the torchlight for the future generation. Classics, when the text becomes the classic, it definitely gives a kind of a torchlight to the coming generations. And it creates further canons. Classics are important for the canonical formation. Lot of canons are created. Based on the classics only, without a classic, you cannot have a proper canon formation in the world. And the last, if not the least, which several critics have pointed out, thinkers have pointed out, historians have pointed out, is the innovativeness of classic. Classics do not have a particular room to discuss because they keep on developing. They keep on recuperating. They keep on replicating the meanings, the context, and everywhere. These are, of course, the major reasons why there is a tendency, and there is an absolute tendency to live with the classics. And of course, there are sub-reasons, I would like to say, like the formation of myths, rituals, archetypes, a whole range of other kind of reasons, a whole range of other kind of subjects that are embedded in the classics. Having said that, today what I'm going to do is, I'm going to look at one or two important South Indian classics, and I would like to take a turn to the contemporary times, from the late 19th century to that of the 20th century, and even 21st century. And I will be discussing some of the more modern classics. What makes a classic a classic? That is fundamentally my job to do. I would like to start from Ilango Adigal's Chilappathikaram, a text which most of you are aware of, particularly students from Delhi University, teachers from Delhi University, and even other universities as well. Now, Chilappathikaram was written during the Sangam times, one of the greatest, the times which a Tamil culture and a Tamil heritage had seen. And the reason why Chilappathikaram became a very, very powerful, innovative, at the same time, such a kind of a haunting epic, is due to the fact that Chilappathikaram, if you look at the format of the text takes you away from the normative parameters of a storyline, and it breaks the boundaries, and it breaks the internal boundaries in the sense how the boundaries of Tamil Nadu, especially from Madurai. See, Madurai at that point of time was not a part of the recent Tamil Nadu. Madurai had a culture of its own. As a result of which, Tamil being one of the ancient languages of India, there used to be a debate which is the finest language or which is the greatest language. For instance, when we look at the classics, is it Tamil or is it Sanskrit? And several people are of the opinion that more than Sanskrit, Tamil had got such a great heritage. And the Tamilian culture, as far as the South Indian culture itself, is a very, very, centuries old culture. And most of these, the people who were associated with the Madurai at that point of time, they really had to make certain kind of adjustment with a kind of a kingdom. And kingdoms which are in the rise, every kingdom which is in the rise, which definitely put forward two ideas before the society. Number one, some kind of adjustment where they have to keep their track with the changing movements, especially with the lower caste people and also with the upper caste people. And a woman became a central problem in most of the kingdoms. Of course, this is not something which is connected to South India only. One can find the similar resonances which are lying deep in the epics and in the classics, if you look at the North Indian classics or any other classics for that matter. I do not want to say North India, South India, that kind of a division. But one thing is very clear. The Tamil culture and the Tamil heritage, it dates back to much before the BCs also. And the South India being South Indian, the entire South Indian peninsula for that matter, they had a lot of anthro-ethnographic relatedness which make us aware in contemporary times that there are several stories which are still in the rubric of certain dangers. Okay, stories are shrouded in mysteries. Several stories are shrouded in mysteries. And obviously, as one of the early cultures in South India, particularly from this Tamil Nadu and Karnataka peninsula, when they started through the stories essentially were told by the tribals and the Adivasis and the rest of the things. And later it got a transformative period to get the stories converted into certain other forms, which which gave a peculiar kind of a design for the kings and the queens when the kingdoms started rising up. So there is a kingdom formation which makes certain things which are aligned to a literary text. Of course, this is Chilappathikaram was written in verse. And here we come across the central crux of a woman, Kannagi. Kannagi, who really burns the Madurai court. Okay, the kingdom is burned. We are not looking at the typical decadence of the kingdom, but the anger which the woman comes up with. Now, the big question arises, if in Chilappathikaram, Kannagi is responsible for the destruction of a kingdom, or even for a decadence of a kingdom, and her anger, her vociferous anger, sporadic outburst of this anger, how come we do not see a Draupadi like that? This is a question which is asked among the scholars. Many historians have debated it. We know that, including historians like Romila Thapa. Several other historians, I can give the names of many, many historians who have debated it actually. But Kannagi's vengeance, in fact, gave a new moment to the South Indian, particularly that peninsula, that kind of a peninsular culture, whereby women got certain kind of idea regarding the divinity, worship, and all those kinds of things. Kannagi burning the Madura is, in fact, it gave way to a lot of new kind of ideas regarding women, that women are, coming to the forefront. They are the devotees. They can be the devotees of God. They worship. And the anklet, the entire Chilappathikaram is based on the story of this anklet. That anklet which she just blots on the floor, it creates a real kind of a path-breaking thunderous storm in the South Indian history, where woman comes to the forefront. This is only one aspect of Chilappathikaram. There are several other aspects of Chilappathikaram when we talk about the kingdoms and the empires, which are working together, which are at the rock bottom of the foundation of classics. Now, kingdoms were established with the help of the classics, which at one point of time can rise to the glory, and at another point of time, the glory can wane. So we are not looking at the rise of the kingdom only with the, when the classics are read, the stories are told, retold, or whatever. For instance, I'll give you one example. See, the story of Ramayana, of course, we know that there are several Ramayanas. There is not one particular Ramayana. We never can locate any classical text to one point of origin. Please remember that. There are several points of origin for a classic. If you are seeking just one point of origin for a classic, in that case, it makes you clear that you perhaps will be narrow-minded, and this narrow-mindedness further can generate a great kind of a fear, because you are afraid of you're afraid of several other kind of the origins which are coming up, which are at the rock bottom for the creation of a classic. So the kingdom is not just a power structure where the king and the queen do come up, but the kingdom ultimately need to unwind the power structure, and the classics have the power to unwind the power structures of several kingdoms. And throughout all the world, you can find that this exactly had happened. There is no doubt of it. There are historical postulations. Let us forget about the historical postulation. There are the sociological conditions where every classic to a great extent talks about the rise and fall of the kingdom. See, there is a debate in our time that was Homer just one man, just like was Vyasa the only one person who wrote or who heard things being told to write Mahabharata, or was Homer just one man who wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey? Of course, the recent group of critics, including Constantin Grappus and many others, Constantine Graves is a very important, Greek historian in our time, a contemporary Greek historian and also anthropologist. Graves really, I'm not talking about Robert Graves. This is Constantine Graves. Constantine Graves really powerfully tells us that Homer was not just one person, but it was a group of people who kept on, going from one place of Greece to another place of Greece, where Athens became one of the centers where these stories and the rest of the things were retold and told and told again and again. So Chilappathikaram, it created a kind of a platform where the pattern of the understanding of Kannagi's revenge, the burning of Mathura, the waning of the kingdom, that replicated to almost all regions of South India. That created a very important aspect. For instance, the preamble, if you look at in Chilappathikaram, the preamble, Pathikam, it connects the last canto of the epic. And it talks about the epic recounting of the events. And Chilappathikaram, it really exposed the Sangam dynasty. And immediately after that, we come across, there were attempts in South India to write similar classics, but most of them did not survive. For instance, one text which I have in my mind is Tolkappiyam, which dates back to the 2nd century. And Tolkappiyam was a very, very powerful text. But the point was its circulation did not, the economy of circulation was not that powerful, just like if you equate Tolkappiyam with that of Chilappathikaram or something like that. So classics also produce the need of this circulation. The circulation in the sense, not only the story as a circulative mechanism, on the contrary, the thoughts, the entangled thoughts in the classics, that need to be recuperated and circulated all over the globe. This is why we regard Odyssey as one of the primary texts which do talk about the question of the lust and also the question of the war and also the question of the rise and fall of the different kingdoms and the rest of the things. Now, sacrifice is an aspect which is intricately related to any kingdom. You cannot talk about a kingdom without a sacrifice. It's a fact. It's a plain fact. And I'm trying to link this idea of the sacrifice to the contemporary times within a short span of time. When you look at sacrifice, how can you theorize sacrifice and how can you historicize sacrifice? These are the two questions which always plague our minds. See, for instance, lot of sacrifices were done at the altar of Zeus in Greece, and where the oracles were prophesied. Oracles need to be prophesied and sacrifices need to be done. Sacrifices are the pretext, I would say the pretext for any kind of a prediction to happen. People do not come at the altar and predict all of a sudden that this is exactly what is going to happen. They will not. They want something to sacrifice. Human sacrifices, apart from other than the animal sacrifices, which is a very, very important factor, human sacrifices were energized during the Greek times. And obviously, if you look at the history of the Greek times to right from the Peloponnesian War and all those kinds of things, we come to know that human sacrifices were the gods and goddesses and all those people and also the kings. They really were looking for these sacrificial altars so that the kingdom can be strengthened. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like to tell you that even in India, situation was not much different. Though we had a totally different kind of a social strata. We had slavery, we had the issue of the caste in the sense, the caste, internecine caste war, internecine tribal warfares. So caste was fighting against another caste. Obviously, there was Brahmanism above all. Apart from that, we come across several tribal internecine warfares. So these are the things which energize the process of sacrifice for the ultimate satisfaction of any kind of particular god. Whether the god can be a supreme god like the upper caste people believe, or the king wanted to have such a kind of a god. The sacrifices. One thing we need to remember: sacrifices were constantly, happening in India, even for certain other unknown gods. The gods who were not represented in literatures and narratives or whatever. So sacrifice is a very, very entangled and a very, very complex phenomenon. However, if you look at the Roman times, we come across a group of people uh, who were ready to get sacrificed for the kingdom. And Giorgio Agamben has written a fantastic book, which some of you would be knowing, called Homo Sacer. And he calls the people who were willingly, willingly they were, the people who used to go to the king to get sacrificed for the rise of the kingdom. They are called the sacres, the human beings who willfully are ready to sacrifice their body or whatever, their life for the sake of the kingdom. Homo Sacer. And this Homo Sacer is a continuity, according to Agamben, to the more modern times. And I will examine this within a short span of time. Agamben talks about this, the Roman sacrifice of the Homo Sacers with respect to some of the excruciating things that happened in the last century. The rise of the concentration camps, Auschwitz, Dachau, Treblinka. All right. Inside the concentration camps also there were people. He's not talking about particularly about the Jewish community, but there were other communities which were like nomads from the East Europe, and from certain other parts of Europe. They were literally they became the Homo Sacers. So it's a series of continuity when we look at this sacrificial phenomenon. Now, sacrifices, once they energize the kingdom, people used to believe that the kingdom becomes all the more very, very powerful, undaunting. And such a kind of the king who rules the kingdom, that kingdom definitely cannot be toppled by any number of people, either by the nomads or by their enemies or by those people who happen to look at these kingdoms from outside. So from Tolkappiyam, if you look at the constitution of the major South Indian classics, there were only 3 or 4 major classics that popped up in South India. In Tamil Nadu, there were 1 or 2. Karnataka, there were 1 or 2. Kerala per se did not have such a kind of a classical text which goes back to, the 7th or the 6th century. Because Malayalam is a kind of a language, it developed from out of Chantamil. Okay, so Malayalam language had a development from both from Sanskrit and also from Tamil. And there were 2 types of Tamils at that point of time, Chandamil and Karintamil. So part of the Malayalam language had a kind of a development from there, but we Keralites did not have a classic text to claim, which goes back to the 6th or the 7th centuries or whatever. However, in Kerala also, the spirit of Chilappathikaram was well taken. But the production of classics, obviously such a classic or something that could follow the footsteps of Ilango Adigal or something like that, that never took place in Kerala. There are different reasons for that. One of the interesting books which came recently, written by Manju Jaidka, my friend, Guns and Gods, Guns and Missionaries. This Manu gives some interesting, archival information regarding the role of the missionaries, which curtailed one section of knowledge, the classical knowledge in Kerala, at the same time propagating another kind of peculiar kind of a knowledge where the notion of the classic becomes very, very hybrid. So classics did not stand as one particular text where you have to go back each and every time. A kind of a hybrid information, a lot of hybridity took place inside the classics. For example, one of the important things of this continuity, the seamless continuity of the classics to that of the contemporary times, one cannot look at this aspect without looking at the colonial history of India. Of course, in South India, the colonial history had a different kind of a take. South Indians were, most of this peninsular, South Indians were in touch with the Romans, the British, the Dutch, the Portuguese since time immemorial. In Kerala, the recent excavations that had happened in a place from where I hail in, basically, Muziris. This Muziris was a port at one point of time where a lot of ships used to arrive from Rome and also from Greece and other regions. And we have excavated a lot of interesting things regarding an ancient mercantile expansion, mercantile trade, which Kerala used to have with Greeks and also with Rome, and also with the Portuguese people came much later. 1492, if 1492 was the year that marked Columbus's landing in Latin America, 1498 marked the coming of another famous figure, Vasco da Gama, in Kerala. And Vasco da Gama's arrival, as Manupuli and several other people have commented about it, Vasco da Gama's arrival, when Vasco da Gama came to Calicut, one of the small regions within close to Calicut, the constitution of the Calicut, the port, and other kinds of things were entirely different. Those were the reigns of the Zamorins, which in Malayalam we called Zamorins. And Vasco da Gama was interestingly, he wanted, when he was studying the culture of South India, there is an anecdote that he went into a temple, which is the Shaiva temple. I don't know in which part of Calicut that temple was located. There are a lot of temples there, but I haven't seen such a temple right now. Maybe the temple may not be in existence at that kind of form. Gama was taken inside the temple, and inside the temple he was taking a tour. And while he was looking at the strange kind of the murtis and all those kinds of idols or whatever, he was completely taken aback by the cruel and the fiery faces of these idols. And the story goes like this: Gama sped away from the temple like anything, out of strange kind of fear, roaring. We find a roaring Vasco da Gama coming out of the temple. He became mad for some time. He mad in the sense, not in the sense of, he was completely, he became unconscious. Because even in Portugal or in any other part of the globe, he definitely wouldn't have seen idols with, fiery faces, with, multiple hands or multiple heads, with all these kinds of, piercing, the fiery weapons. And Gama was unconscious for a few days, and it took a long time for Gama to recover. So what I'm trying to say is, when we look at these kind of the colonial interactions and other kinds of interactions with South Indian Peninsula had, obviously the classics also took a different take and a different shape in course of time, with their peculiar kind of adjustment and also intricate complexities which were there in inside the stories. Hybridity, a hybrid moment of the classics began to develop in most of the South Indian Peninsula. Now, I believe that novel is, of course, we know that in India, we cannot talk about the rise of the novel without talking about the colonial history. Colonial rule, missionaries, they all played a very crucial role for the rise of the novel all over India. Whether you take any novel for that matter, all right, any novel for that matter, there is a colonial conjunction. Without that, the novel in the current status will never develop. Now, the rise of the novel, to a great extent, it created a different kind of a platform for energizing and also to destabilizing some of the moments which we read in classics like Chilappathikaram and all. Though in Chilappathikaram, we find Kannagi becoming very, very, the sporadic outbursts of her anger becoming very, very virulent, and Kannagi is burning the entire Madurai city. Next to that, we find a lot of obfuscations of women. Women were consistently taken out from the social practices, cultural practices and everything. And women were, some innocent, girls were the primary modalities of sacrifice. Okay, when you look at the South Indian history, it's very, very, very painful. I'm not going to get into those kind of histories. I have a lot of archival material on that. And in course of time, I am planning to write a book on that, which may not be directly connected to literature. Now, Akilan, the Jnanapith Award laureate, Akilan, in his fantastic novel Chittirappaavai, he created a family history where a woman is constantly Sundari, a woman is constantly defying the male-dominated structures, and that woman constantly recollects Kannagi's adventures, Kannagi's anger, and Sundari, the protagonist, she points out that in Tamil Nadu or in South India for that matter, Kannagis will be constantly reproduced and no one can stop the evolution of Kannagis in more modern times. A family history. And the point which I'm trying to make here is, novel itself assumes the form of a kingdom. Novel itself is a kingdom, because that a writer of a novel, whoever it is, even if it is you or I, we are creating a big kingdom in the novel, whatever be the the genre of the novel belong to. Novel itself is a kingdom, and inside the novel we build up the characters, either to unwind or to stress further some of the societal historical changes, isn't it? Of course we do like that. And Akhilan's this novel created a path-breaking moment in Tamil language, because this is a modern classic. Akhilan's Chitrapave becomes a more modern classic in the context of the 20th century, I would say. Of course, there were novels which were written before that. One cannot say which is a best. I'm not going for a debate which is a best novel or a bad. Let us not engage in a debate like that. I am picking up some novels which have created, which stand this, the test of time, and which became the classic. You are Anandamurthy Samskara, a novel which all of you know. I would like to claim it as a kind of a amazing modern classic, in the sense, if Anandamurthy wouldn't have written Samskara, I am thinking it like this: would any other person could have written a novel like Samskara? Of course, we know that Samskara was also made into a movie. Kannada acted in the movie. Girish Karnad was one of the actors in the movie. Samskara really defied the societal structures, the very, very stringent societal structures inside Karnataka for a long time. The Carnatic, culture, of course, there was a tradition behind that. The Vachana poetry, the Vachana poems written by, which were chanted by, not fundamentally written, which were chanted by people like Basavanna, Akka Mahadevi. All these people, and of these Vachana people come from. Their tradition, Vachana poetry were written and they were chanted by those people who were cobblers, people who were even prostitutes, the floozies. Some of the Vachana poetry were written by the people who were in the habit of doing some menial jobs in certain houses or whatever. Why are the temples not open to them? This is one of the questions which Akka Mahadevi was constantly asking while she was invoking that Shaivite tradition. Basavanna, on the other hand, was also looking at the opening of the up of the temple for each and every human being, where there won't be any kind of borders. He defied the construction, the constitution of the borders. Now, what I would like to claim is that, you are Anandamurthy was looking at a particular juncture in Karnataka where, of course, Samskari is not a very linear text. There are complex situations there. There is a description of the plague and a lot of other things are there. I'm not going to get into the text right now. But you know that Anandamurthy really was trying to defy the structures, the existing caste structure in Tamil Nadu, in Karnataka. And Samskara, to a great extent, gave way to the rise of, because when Anandamurthy was writing this, Samskara, Dalit discourse was not in prominence. We all know that. Dalit discourse and Dalit writing was not in prominence all over India, perhaps. But through Anandamurthy, there came, fundamentally a need to constitute and reconstitute the issues of the lower class, whereby people who were not in the habit of knowing or studying for a long, long period, they came to the forefront to realize that we too have a history to tell, and we too have something to tell. And this is our telling that exactly happens. Anandamurthy's next text, Bharatipura, even that also is a classic, however, with a certain kind of subtle differences. Because Anandamurthy did not concentrate on one region, because while he was writing Bharatipura, he was under the impression that Bharatipura should be made into a fantastic, he thought that that will be getting a global acclamation, which unfortunately did not happen. All right. And the third important text again, a classic text which I'm talking about, I'm only talking about the novels here, is Kusum Bale. Kusum Bale is a very recent text. Not recent in the sense some 20, 25 years back, slightly more than that. Kusum Bale was a different kind of a classic. And in Kusum Bale, actually, what Devanuru Mahadeva, another writer from Karnataka, what he did was, he really probed into the questions of the construction of the Dalita psyche. Dalita psyche is, to such an extent, was not a point of discussion. Of course, in today's time, we are having a lot of platitudes of Dalit literatures which are coming up. life writing seems to be one of the primary mode, whereby through the life writing we try to understand the community consciousness and also problems, the internal contradictions of the Dalit self. But in Kusum Bale, the kind of the metaphors, the strange kind of the metaphors and the spurious images which Devanuru Mahadeva comes up with, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it never ever was, done by or written by or narrated by a single writer in India so far. The image of I'm not talking about the image of the Dalits, but the Dalit psyche when it comes forward, the kind of even the blood is a very, very important, the streaming flow, which connects, the blood, which he talks about through the Somapa's vision. There is a character called Somapa's vision and the rest of the things. It is also connected to the blood, the menstrual blood of a particular group of, Dalit women who were stranded in their society for some time. And later, a series of Dalit persecutions that happened all over South India. And later, much later, when the Dalit uprising began, could the Dalits really come forward to take a revenge? And or were Dalits considered to be only as the sacrificial goats, like what Agamben talks about in the Homo sapiens? Because at one point of time, the underclass or the underprivileged were the sacrificial goats, not only in South India, but all over the country. We know that. And the last novel which I would like to talk about is a very recent novel. And I know some of you might have gone through this work. It's an amazing novel which has got a universal platform in the sense, you can take this novel anywhere and you can claim that this is one of the very powerful Indian texts which has come up in recent times. It's called Tejo Tungabhadra by a writer called Vasudendra. Now, Tejo Tungabhadra how did it become a classic? In Tejo Tungabhadra, we have a history of Vijayanagara Empire. You all know Vijayanagara Empire. Vijayanagara Empire connected to the Portuguese. All right. And there is a group of people who are taken to Portugal during the time of the Vijayanagara Empire. Please remember, Salman Rushdie also wrote a novel, connected to the Vijayanagara Empire very recently. You all know that, the Victory City. But in this novel, what happens is, there comes an interconnectedness and interrelatedness between a group of, and different kinds of people from Karnataka who go there. And finally, the novel ends with a lot of pathos in the sense a lover happened to see, the girl whom he loved married to a Christian, during the collapse of the empire. And by then, the man had to persecute himself quite a lot. He was also attacked. His ear was taken out. And it's such a very, very tragic picture. And moreover, Vasudendra really breaks the boundaries of the rivers, Tejo, Tungabhadra. Well, Tungabhadra is a river which is in South India, of course, you know where it is. Tejo is a river which is connected to Portugal. So the histories of the rivers, the multiplicity of, the generations, and also while, Vasudendra was trying to reconstructualize, rehistoricize the events, he mentions the events in such a way that everyone, during the time of Vijayanagara Empire, were also interested in sacrifices. So was the case with the Portuguese also. So he is trying to break the post-colonial kind of, the typical dictum which we follow regarding the native versus the colonized. That is not his agenda. He is talking about even, the natives were, deeply entrenched in such a system where such a kind of, these kinds of dangers were very, very common. And these dangers in the sense, the natives also were engaged in all these kinds of superstitions, all these kinds of belief systems or whatever. Now, before concluding, I would like to tell you a few things regarding the future of the classics. I am very concerned about the future of the classics from where I began my lecture. Now, as far as I am concerned, I told you that every literary representation also sometimes is in the form of the rise of a kingdom. Of course, it can wane also in course of time. And let me tell you, when Giorgio Agamben talks about the Homo sapiens, he tries to link to the Homo sapiens and also several other questions of this intentionally driven people for sacrifice to that of the contemporary systems of torture. And the torture becomes a very, very complicated phenomenon even in our digital world. We are undergoing at times we undergo some certain kind of a digital torture. In an age of artificial intelligence, what is going to be the future of the classics is a big question. Now, kingdom, regarding the kingdom, Walter Benjamin had a fantastic analysis in his, the text on history, thesis on history. And what Benjamin says is, there is no kingdom, there is no civilization, which is at the same time a document of barbarism. So the moment when you talk about a civilization, whether it can be any other great civilization South India had seen or India as a country had seen, please remember, it is at the same time a document of barbarism, barbarity. There is a huge element of barbarism which is at the rock bottom, which gave rise to the rise of several kingdoms. So no kingdom, no civilization is possible without a barbarism. So the moment when we bring a text into focus, what makes a classic, when we bring a text into focus, we also should keep in mind that there is also a danger regarding what kind of a kingdom are we talking about or bring into focus. Now, two major theoreticians on classics at the same time in our time. One is Roberto Calasso. Roberto Calasso, all of you must be knowing, an Italian postmodern writer who wrote novels like A Car, The Marriage of Cadmus and Harmony. And he wrote one of his last works was The Celestial Hunter. I request all of you to go through this work, The Celestial Hunter. He talks about the complicatedness between the hunter and the hunted. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like to extend the argument of Roberto Calasso regarding the hunter and the hunted to the more modern notions of the classics. Because in the more modern notion of the classic, if we are not going back to the times, if we are not going back to the myths which make us live by, I assert that they make us live like the hunted. We are constantly hunted. We may not be the hunters at all, but we are constantly hunted by a lot of things. And how are we getting hunted by? And who is hunting us? There is a superior culture which is hunting us, which absolutely want our energies to be de-energized, okay, from the field of the classics and from the field of, several other things. And this is a deliberate political movement which is happening across all the globe. Italo Calvino, yet another postmodern writer who wrote a fantastic text called Why Read the Classics? Here, Calvin is talking about a number of classics, like right from Ariosto. He talks about Don Quixote. He talks about the modern writers also, like Joseph Conrad. It's a very fascinating book of essays by Italo Calvino. And Calvino complicates this matter that classics, according to Calvino, a text like Orlando Furioso. Orlando Furioso never can remain a classic for a long time, because there are the internal energies which are de-energize Orlando Furioso. So there is an academic innovativeness that is academics, underpinning to undercut certain forms of classics in our time, whereby certain other forms of classics can always arise. This is I am articulating the point of Italo Calvino from his famous book Why Write the Classics. Umberto Eco, yet another Italian writer, of course, who we all know Umberto Eco, the Italian semiotician, the Italian fascinating novelist. He wrote a fantastic book, Six Walks Through the Fictional Woods. It's a very interesting book. And we all know that, Eco's writing is very, very elliptical, very, very interesting. He's not writing very, a dense book, text or whatever. Some of his novels, I would say, are very, very dense, including Foucault's Pendulum, which in fact was a second novel. But in Six Walks Through the Fictional Wood, Eco makes an analysis that during the medieval times, we had a key to communicate with all the mysteries of nature. But in the modern times, we lost the key. It's very fascinating. In the medieval times, we used to communicate with all kinds of mysteries of nature. So at a time when these classics were formulated, when people were trying to write in verse the classics, okay, the writers, whether it is Ilangu Adigal, whether it is Araba, or whether it is Vyasa, or whatever it is, whoever it is, classics and epics, they used to have certain kind of keys to communicate with the mysteries of nature, all kinds of mysteries. But with modernism, with the rise of this civilization, at a later point of time, we lost the key, so that we can't directly communicate with the mysteries like the thunder, or in the earthquakes, the beginning of the earthquakes, or the eruption of a volcano, something like that, before the lava flows out, or something like that. And Eco did a lot of work regarding the medieval times. Most of his works are those people who are familiar with Umberto Eco's novels and writings. You all know that Eco was, dealt deep into the medieval times, okay, either to recover the key or whatever. His own library contains more than 40,000 books. He had 4 different libraries in Italy. All right. Now, the 3 fundamental issues which I would like to raise, before, as part of my concluding this lecture. Would the classics remain in certain closets in contemporary times? This is a question which is plaguing me. And I know very well that this is a question which is plaguing you as well. If we are not reading a classic, if only certain cultural snippets and other forms of the classics are presented to us, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to tell you that we will be glued into a system of absolute perverse kind of a myth making. Myth making is always good, but when the myths are couched with certain kind of very, very dangerous agenda, political agenda or whatever, let me tell you that our classics will not survive. Not only the classics, our knowledge about the classics, Chilappathikaram, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Orlando Ariosto, and many other texts, the epics like Odyssey, or even Iliad, and the great works which had come up from the Middle East, as well as from our neighbor countries like Azerbaijan. Alaga, another important classic from Poland. Alaga, a fantastic classic which talks about the minor cultures which are in the development. Second question which I would like to raise is, the classics always have produced an economy of desire. I would like to stress this point, an economy of desire. And this economy of desire makes us live along with the vanquished, even the vanquished people inside the classics. Vanquished in the sense, the people who were trodden by the chariot wheels when the kingdoms were very, very powerful. The people who were thrown out by the kings, the emperors, and several other people. Women who were absolutely not given a voice of representation. And even the minor cultures, which the kings, emperors, the warriors used to constantly attack. The people who became the homo saccers, deliberately the people for the sacrifice, people who stood in a long line for their heads to get beheaded at the altar so that oracles can be prophesied. This is a very important factor which we need to keep in mind. The last, if not the least, idea of the classics, why classics and why we live with the classics, is due to classics are interwoven with several cultures. There is not one singular culture inside any classic, whether it can be Chilappathikaram, whether it can be Tolkappiyam, or whether it can be any other classic for that matter. It is interwoven with the different kinds of cultures. So there is an internal mechanism that spreads the classics to different quarters of the world, different quarters, different corners of the world, whereby someone who may not be aware of any particular culture also get an opportunity to go through a work like Chilappathikaram or Tolkappiyam, or for instance, Ramayana, any form of Ramayana for that matter. We all know that we had seen difficult times with Ramayana, teaching of Ramayana, I would say. One of the brilliant essays which we were teaching in Delhi University was taken out. And you all know that who wrote that essay, A.K. Ramanujan. All right. An amazing scholar on classics, an Indologist, an anthropologist, what else and what not. A.K. Ramanujan's essay was taken out, not in recent times, a decade ago. So what does that signify? All these things signify the dangers, certain dangers in which we have to understand the modalities of the classics. Yet another story which we were teaching, and the story was written by Mahashoda Devi. All of you know the story also, Draupadi. And that also was taken out. That also was completely taken out from the syllabus. Despite all hue and cry of the academics, the story never figured in the, and there were people, sadly to say, who are at the helm of this academic curriculum, who encouraged to take such a story out, because that story, according to them, it portrays or it depicts nudity or whatever, where we are having, excruciating things more than, the kind of, there is nothing like nudity there, whatever it is. All of you know who know the story, or who are aware, who are familiar with the works of Mahashoda Devi, what she did. So all these are indications that we are going through dangerous times where even our classics within a short span of time will be getting curtailed in certain. So we need to come out of this kind of the closets. We need to make the classics, live with the classics, propagate the classics. Without classics, there never can be any canon. As I told you at the beginning of my lecture, there never can be the evolution of certain genres without classics. The classics obviously have a hybrid culture also. So South India, to a great extent, it problematized the concept of the classic by claiming the veritable and also very, very digressive kind of, anthropological, ethnographic, different type of cultures we used to have since time immemorial. And the South Indian classics undoubtedly propagated such a message that a liberation of the vanquished and also the underprivileged and any class, the subclass of the people is a possibility by breaking the domains of the narrow constructed parameters of nation. The classics will survive more than the nations. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Unni. Now that talk really has that Unni stamp. I think you've come up to everybody's expectations, and we've had a number of people listening to your talk, about 50 of them, and then I stopped allowing them to enter. There are some people still in the waiting room. I'm going to allow them now and give them a little piece of my mind too. So, because we want everyone to be on time. So just let them join and I'll repeat what I want to say to them. So that was Unni Krishnan, and he's been talking about texts that perhaps Delhi University may be familiar with, but are the texts being taught in Delhi University, Unni?
Chilappathikaram still is there. All right.
Yeah,
And
but outside DU, probably we are not familiar with them. So it would be really appreciated if you could put the names and titles of the writers and the books that you have mentioned. If you can just circulate, if you can send them to me, I'll circulate them to all the people who have been attending.
I'll do that.
That will be very nice, because the range was very wide indeed, and we have a variety of students, some seasoned professors and some upcoming scholars. Now, let me repeat what I wanted to say a little while ago. We stopped allowing people to enter the session after the first few minutes, and in future, I request you all to come on time, because treat it like a lecture and give due respect to the person who's speaking. So please be on time. And those of you who came in late, if you were allowed today, probably next time you will not be allowed. So make it a point to be on time. That's one thing, show respect to the work that we are doing to the literature that we are also fond of. Okay, so coming back to this talk, those of you who have anything to say or any questions to ask, you may put it on the chat box and I'll share it with the speaker. And there is somebody who has joined right now. So I don't know if he was logged out and if he's joined back now, but please join on time the next time around. We begin at 7 o'clock and we end around 8 o'clock or a little after. Right. So we have just heard about a few texts that we are not familiar with, but we would like to know more about it. And I love the points that you made. You started with the fact that classics are not being read anymore, and university departments are not really teaching literature or even humanities and liberal arts. We've been seeing these news items from time to time over the last couple of years. And it is really a very scary situation because we are all into literature and we know what literature means. And in fact, literature is something that completes a human being. If literature is not taught, then I feel, and I'm sure we all would agree, that human beings would be incomplete. So we need to do something and spread the interest in literature, particularly when you look around yourself and you find that all the new universities and colleges that have sprung up, they are professional colleges. There is no sign of any literature, there's no sign of any English department, and hardly any humanities and liberal arts. So we need to make academicians, educationists aware of the value of literature. Now, I would request some of our senior listeners out here to switch on their videos and come onto the screen so that we can have some kind of a fruitful discussion. There are some senior people present out here. We have Roshan here, and we have uh, Professor Anil Prasad. If you can switch on your video, it will be very nice. He's another senior person out here. And Manpreet, Sushila Singh was also there. And Gonul, uh, Nivedita. So if you could please switch on your videos, it would be very nice. And let's have some kind of a conversation. Uni, this is Professor Anil Prasad. He attends our sessions quite often. Earlier, when we used to have, we used to have these sessions earlier on a regular basis. He was one of the regular attendees. So welcome, Professor Anil Prasad. I hope you enjoyed today's talk. Your sound is not clear. Sound, we cannot hear the sound. No. You are not muted, but there is no sound. Sushila ji, if you're around, please switch on your video. Manpreet? No, sir. Professor Prasad, we cannot hear you.
Sorry, ma'am.
Maybe if you take the...
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, Manpreet. Yeah, I can hear Manpreet.
I'm as usual en route. My signals are really bad. In and out.
Okay, so you are on your way back home, huh? Well,
yes,
next time we have a talk, try and reach home soon so that you can log in and we can have a conversation with you. Dr. Prasad, try taking out your earphones and plugging them back again. It might work. Hi, Gonul. Gonul has logged in from Turkey. Yeah.
Yes, I am listening, Manju. Actually, these works are, I am not very familiar with these works, so I am listening this time. Yes, I am learning a lot. It's really very beneficial.
We are all in more or less the same boat because you see, we have so many different languages and different cultures. The texts that we discussed today, they're not familiar with everyone, so you're not the only one. Huh? But it was a welcome introduction.
We are learning. Yes.
So, Dr. Prasad, will you unmute now? Let's see if we can hear you. No, we still can't hear you. We still cannot hear you. Sushila ji?
Uh, uh, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
very well. Yes,
yes,
very well.
yes. This is excellent talk by Professor Krishnan. Um, so many things. Of course, the texts, not familiar with all the texts, but it was so wide ranging, bringing in all the classics. And I was quite surprised that this Dopadi has been, Mahashweta's Dopadi has been removed. I mean,
Yes,
this is a
this is a
phenomenal
yeah.
text. And
Mhm.
I agree with Professor Jaidka that literature needs to be taught. Without literature, we are not uh, human beings that way. One point was very interesting, I think, in future or in some other talk, Professor Unni Krishnan will speak on this, that classics are interwoven with different cultures. This opens up, I think, expansive area for all those who are interested not only in humanities but in uh, those literatures coming from, he talked about oral cultures and literatures coming from the marginalized people. So how civilization will continue, human civilization will continue on this earth, I think those questions are also associated. Uh, Wonderful to hear all the major classics. I think if in translation we need to go to read all those texts, not familiar with all of them, but the way he talked about the important classics, that was wonderful. And I'm so happy that I could be present to uh, uh, hear him uh, this evening. Thank you, and all credit goes to Professor Jaidka. Because of her, I get to know something of literature, what is going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Sushila ji. That's very nice, really. And there is a comment that has come up from somebody, which I've just posted to Unni.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
um, Imraj has a question. Now, what you're talking about is very, very relevant, because when we used to have these sessions on a regular basis earlier, a lot of people said that for them, this was like a milestone that kept them going. They would look forward to to our sessions and join in, because
Yes.
those were difficult days, COVID days. And now, even though it's not, we don't have COVID now, but even then, if we have something like this on a regular basis, it gives us something to look forward to. And perhaps we can also put in our 2 cents in the discussions that we have. Now, Ni,
yes,
have you seen
yes. I read. Yeah, I read the query. It's a very, very important and very relevant question. Hemraj, I think Hemraj raised it. Whatever. Thank you, Hemraj, for raising this question. Well, that is the whole problem. That myth and history are intertwined. Myth also is a part and parcel of history, and there is no history without the myth. Please remember this. Can you point out any single history or whatever history is? Let me use plurality. Without myths? Absolutely not. This is something which, very recently in the sense, of course, several decades back, even the question of the mythology and the construction of the myths was descended by Roland Barthes when he wrote his, fabulous text called Mythologies, where even Einstein's brain becomes a form of a myth. All right. Now, the question of politics, that is very, very interesting. When you look at the mythical characters and when you put it as a part and parcel of a mainstream politics, a majoritarian politics, for instance, that becomes very, very, very dangerous. And this is exactly happening, what is happening in our country and what is happening in many other parts of the globe. One can even talk about the United States in recent times. Day for yesterday was, the great speech made by Donald Trump or whatever. So there is a deliberate agenda to make some of the mythic characters get appropriated and accustomed to the fascinations of a mainstream or even a majoritarian political party, all right, or a majoritarian political agenda, and to create. And while they are taking a mythic character like that, they claim that it is their mythological character, not the character of anyone else. That itself brings into focus the politics of exclusion and inclusion. This is something which all of us need to resist. A particular mythic character, whether it can be Hanuman or whether it can be Jadayu. I'm talking about not from South India, actually South Indian classics right now, or whether it can be someone like a Jambavan. These are the characters whom we are familiar with, or whether it can be Shurpanakha. All right, when these characters are particularly obfuscated, or if certain characters are mythic characters are particularly taken, and when a particular majoritarian politics want to play a lot of politics with that, that's a very dangerous moment in the way of understanding the classics, and a deliberate attempt to destabilize these kinds of things need to take place from our side. From the side of any reader of the classics. Forget about academic context. And this is a dangerous moment in our life, which is happening. It's a universal phenomenon which is happening along with the, I would say, the late capitalism, or I would say with the, or what can, or can we say, with the neoliberal, ideas of the world. All right. No mythic character is an absolute a compendium for one political majoritarian party or majoritarianism. There comes a politics there. It's a very, very dangerous one. If you are doing that, or if you are following that, you are deliberately, consistently, you will be sidelining, okay, your fellow human beings. Okay, and the world is for everyone, not for, any kind of unilateral kind of a majoritarian politics to develop or a party to develop. So appropriation is very dangerous like this.
That is why I feel that sessions like this can at least make us aware of what is happening. And as students of literature, if we know what games are being played, well, that awareness in itself is a step towards setting things right somehow.
Yeah,
So there is another from Nivedita from Trinidad. She has a comment there which I have shared. And she's not familiar with the classics, but she agrees that we should do more to popularize the classics. Yeah. Great. Thank you, Nivedita.
Thank you, Nivedita. Thank you, Nivedita.
Yeah, great to have you. And well, we have the session has been, yeah. Who was that?
Just the ma'am, that's me, Manpreet. So I just wanted to kind of add to what Professor Unni is saying. When myths are being changed and or inverted, and when history is being meddled with, and in many parts of the world, and then the modes of resistance are far and few between, so that but yes, it's commendable that some of you, or some of us, or you literators at least raise the issue. But yes, it's something to think about, really. A wonderful talk, Professor Unni. Really good.
Thank you, Manpreet.
But literature has always been doing that. A couple of days ago, it was the 75th anniversary of George Orwell. And what was he doing in Animal Farm? All men are equal and some are more, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. So that's what literature is supposed to do. It shows you what is happening behind the scenes. And well, the making of a legend is something that we are aware of. A person who's very ordinary or who's not there or who's even evil, you can build a story about him. And the more you repeat a particular story, the more realistic it seems. And so you start believing it at some point. There's another longish comment that has come in. Let me see. Meanwhile, we need to close very soon, but let me see what this is. This is Professor Unni mentions Roland Barthes, following the latter's argument regarding the displacement of the position or the authority of the text from a author from the text, and following, this is a little longish one. Is there not an agenda within the narrative by virtue of its being a narrative itself? Is it possible to detach agenda and narrative from myth or any such semiotic production? I think we need a separate lecture or something like this. I would say that there is always an agenda, hidden or otherwise, and the agenda can be an innocuous one or it can be a dangerous one, but it is for us as students of literature, as critics, to be aware of what is happening. And when there are some questions, you have to send us the list of.
Hello, yes. Yes, Manju. Yeah.
1 minute, there is some disturbance in the back. I will just mute everyone. Mute all. Mute all. Okay. I will unmute. Only you can unmute, and Roshan, you can unmute also. Yeah. So we need to wind up now. Roshan, over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Thank you, Professor Unni. Actually, I really appreciate. It was wonderful listening to you, particularly your theorization about sacrifice in particular, and the way you kind of the way you responded to Chilappathikaram as a classic, and this basically felt like your attempt, of course, theoretically informed kind of attempt, to contemporarize, the whole idea of this classic. And it made a lot of sense, basically. I actually wanted a brief comment from you from the viewpoint of this importance of, there's this phrase called contemporary myth making, Professor Unni. And why this is so very important, particularly from the viewpoint of, the creative writers, and also this contemporary myth making when it is presented to us, the students or scholars of literature, how relevant it is, particularly from the viewpoint of offering what I possibly would term as corrective discourse in the challenging times that we are in. Briefly, and then I'll do the job that has been assigned to me.
That's very important, Roshan. The contemporary myth making is it has two different functions to perform. Number one, the word contemporary itself is contestatory sometimes. Myths can be very, very old ones, like, it can be the myth of Zeus, it can be the myth of Hercules, it can be the myth of Hanuman, it can be any other myth or whatever. But what we know as contemporary is a very contested terrain. I want to repeat this. So people have the freedom to play with the myths. Myths have this ability of free playfulness. And we find the myths very, very entertaining, encouraging, and we have our own agenda sometimes when we play with the myths. For instance, there are a lot of texts which are written in our time which have become bestsellers. Devdut Patnaik, of course, Patnaik is more famous than any other writers.
Amish Tripathi.
Yes, exactly. So there is a peculiar agenda which links the myths to that of the market. All right.
Yes.
I have seen this from my own experience. So when the myths are accommodated to the needs of the market, and if the myth maker, who is a novelist or who is a poet or any other writer, playwright or whatever, and if such a myth maker articulates the myth in such a fashion, the real journey which one can take into the inner core of the myth actually loses. because such myths are there only for the sake of a propaganda politics. A propaganda politics in the sense, a peculiar kind of a market-oriented literature will emerge.
Capitalism, in a sense, taking over.
One could say that it's a late capitalism. Forwarding
Late
more from
capitalism,
Frederick
yeah.
Jameson. All right, and movies like that will be turning up. All right, so we have enough writers like this in our time. So that's a moment which all of us have to understand. I'm not saying that we don't have to read Devnath Patnaik. We have to read Patnaik also. There is no doubt of it. But at the same time, we have to understand in which category do we really fall in. All right. Ultimately, we cannot break all the categories and form a different category. Once you create your own category, that itself becomes, another kind of politics in that. And there is a politics in the myth making. Definitely, I do understand that. But there is a danger in there.
Thank you, Professor Unni. Thank you.
Yeah.
And of course,
I will reply to Ayud's and Kulbhushan later. I got your questions. I have recorded it. All right. Yeah. Ayud's is it's a big question. It will take such a slightly more time.
So I'll do my job. Thank you, Professor Unni. Thank you very much. And you are always thought-provoking, as all of us know. And of course, I mean, the entire talk had so many points to suggest, particularly for the students of literature across India, and of course scholars as well. And it's always a treat to listen to you. So thank you very much for being there, and thank you very much, Professor Jaidka, for opening this platform. I'm sorry I missed out in the this last week's session, but this is a wonderful beginning, ma'am, and thank you very much for that. And I know that this talk is going to be followed by a lot many others, and so many scholars. I'm sure you have that knack of bringing, the global scholarship together. And it appears to be absolutely effortless for the likes of us, because we are sitting, we are sitting away. But these opportunities that you offer, I would term them as golden opportunities, ma'am. Thank you for us to learn, to grow. Thank you. I also thank Professor Sushila Singh. She came in and she made her observation, Professor Kang, Professor Anil Prasad, and so many other participants. Thank you very much for making this session really, really meaningful, fruitful, and memorable. Thank you.
Thank you, Manju. Thank you, Manju. Thank you, Roshan. And thank you, Milo. All those.
And all the people who are listening in, thank you for tuning in, for your comments and all the thank you notes that I'm still getting. I'll try and adjust the chat settings in such a way that everyone can share it without me having to, me having to forward it every time. Professor Anil Prasad, we would like you to give us a talk sometime. So please be in touch with me with some topic that you would like to speak on. And Roshan, you're also on the list, and a lot of our upcoming scholars who have volunteered to be speakers. You will all get a turn sooner or later. So it's great to bond with you all, but remember to be on time next time. Otherwise, I'm not going to allow you to enter. Today, I made two co-hosts who were kind of gentle and who were kind, that they allowed you to enter. And then I removed them as co-hosts because, well, it was getting a bit too much. So please be on time next time. And it's a great session. Thank you, Unni.
My pleasure.
Thank you once again. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Until we meet again the next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.